Hey everybody, hello, welcome to Friday night Fireside Chat, Pentecost Fireside Chat, I guess. The fire is coming. Father's from Steubenville, so let the fire fall. And let's see here. And we go here. See any comments. So welcome back everybody. It seems like it's been forever. Hello Cynthia and Michelle and Ronald and Michelle and Diane. Patricia's here. You all look cozy by the fireside. That's right. Except this is an electric fire, so it doesn't generate heat unless we turn on the heat. So we're not dying here. And then Kermit's here. This is Guillermo's last fireside chat as a deacon. Maybe we can convince him to come back. I think he's going to run for the hills. Kermit says hello. Suzette's here.
Do you have any comments on that, Deacon?
Andrew joined us. So let's see. We've had a busy. Well, we got all kinds of exciting news, Deacon. You're going to be ordained. You start what? You start retreat Sunday.
Yep.
Who's leading your retreat?
Monsignor Avella.
And then Suzette says hi, fathers, and I should say hi, future father. And then ordination is what day?
June 6th.
And you just had an interview with the cathedral. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so they were making short videos of every ordinandi. They were basically asking us two questions. How do we discover our vocation? And what was the one thing that we were looking for after ordination? So it was a simple question. Things that.
But we won't cheat everybody. They'll have to watch the video when it comes out. Of course, we all celebrate everybody. We have tonight's LaCroix sponsorship, which we get no money for. Raz Cranberry. Beautiful flavor for the month of May. Kelly's here, Joe's here, Bernadette's here, Heather's here, Mark's here. So you get ordained, and then where's your new assignment?
So my new assignment is in Blessed Sacrament in Alexandria.
All right.
Yep.
But maybe we can get you back here for a mass before.
I'm definitely planning to do that because in between assignments we have like a week and a half off. So I'm definitely planning to come back to Sacred Heart and say a first mass.
Awesome.
Maybe we can do one in English, one in Spanish.
Won't that be great? And
then it's beautiful too. You can tell them about your chalice because you got an older chalice that's got a priest inscribed name on it too.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about it one time at the Rectory chat, but it was kind of nice because I was looking for a chalice. And I think a chalice for a priest is something that is really personal, and it kind of has to describe you in a way. So I was looking for something simple, but something nice, liturgically speaking. And for a long time, I was looking at catalogs and stores online, and it was a lot of money. So I was like, oh my gosh, I want to spend some money, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of money. So I talked to a priest friend from the diocese, and he said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to buy it for you." So I was really happy about that. Nice, and then we had a conversation with a common friend from another diocese from Colorado Springs, and he was like, "Oh, I actually have an old chalice that I don't use much, so I can give it to you. You just have to replate it." So it was really nice because the chalice is from 1910, so it's an old chalice, and it has a lot of spiritual value because a lot of priests have been using it to say mass, so I was really happy with that.
And someday, many years down the road, when you retire or pass, you'll give it to someone else, and it's kind of beautiful because in a certain sense, all the priests who have used that chalice for 110 years, their priesthood continue through you, as someday your priesthood will continue through someone else who will use it in a certain sense. It's a beautiful thing.
Where did you get your chalice from?
From Bob Solinsky. It was his uncle John. So he was ordained in 1948.
Okay.
And it's a solid sterling chalice. It's beautiful. It's got real diamonds in it. It's probably worth a lot of money. He was amazingly generous, Bob. And I think he had two uncles. One of them was here. Julius, I think, was the pastor here. And
yes. In the old church downtown.
In the old downtown church. And John was also a long-time pastor. And Julius was the funny one, and John was the strict one, from what I heard.
Well, John was funny too, but he could be kind of.
You had to be careful about his. Yeah, you had to be careful about his humor. I said, well, I'd love to buy one if you want to sell one. And I was at dinner at a friend's house in Manassas, and he bought a case in, and he gave it to me. I said, Bob, what's this? He says, this is yours. I said, Bob, I can't take this. So yeah, it was so amazingly generous of him.
It's beautiful.
And where did you get yours, Father?
We had at St. Charles Seminary, where I was the seminary when we were deacons, there were chalices and some vestments and a few things that had been donated to the seminary with the stipulation that they'd go to a newly ordained priest. So our deacon class went into this room and they had all these things laid out and they were going to do a raffle. And if you were interested in something, you put your number on a piece of paper and they would draw for each thing. Well, I got like 3 things, and so like the dean of men's like, I'm taking you with me to Atlantic City. But I got this
You're a winner.
wonderful chalice, and it's 116 years old now.
Nice.
And so, like you say, it's just amazing. And then my parents had it replated, and so it's gotten a lot of use. I need to get it replated. It's 14 years a priest this summer,
It's
and
got a
so
lot of good use.
so yeah, so it's a lot of. So that's neat. So you got your chalice and you've got your assignment, and then we're excited too because ding 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 ding. We have a 3rd priest here at Sacred Heart. We have Father Jack Riley. He's a priest of our diocese. He went to Notre Dame, and I knew him when I was a chaplain at Christendom.
Oh,
Or no,
nice.
sorry, when he was the chaplain and I was a student at Christendom. And I told him no good deed goes unpunished because he was promoting vocations, and when I was graduating he encouraged me to talk to some seminarians and think about the priesthood, which I didn't want to do, and now I'm his boss. So I
Just
said,
out of curiosity, was that before or after Cornelius O'Brien?
it was around the same time. Father O'Brien was the main chaplain, but he would come
okay.
in from St. Timothy's and say
Okay.
Mass and have like office hours. But Father Riley was actually on campus.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
and so anyways, he's a great priest. He's been out in Denver at the Augustine Institute for about 10 years, I think. And he's very smart. He loves St. Therese of the Flower. He's a great preacher, great, homilist and confessor. And we're excited he's coming. So I knew that for about a month, a little bit less than a month, but I had to sit on it. I couldn't tell anybody. I wanted to tell Father Holmes in the worst way, but I sat on it because I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And so then I was very happy so that we will have 3 priests now. So that means we're going to all go on vacation now for like months at a time.
And Blessed Sacrament's getting an exceptional man.
Absolutely, absolutely. Valerie has joined us. She says, I love these stories. Thank you for sharing them. And she says, hello. And let's see, Robin's here. And she said, thanks, fathers. Donna joined us. Donna, I hope you're enjoying your new life post John Paul the Great. She worked there for a long time. Her
Oh,
kids went
nice.
to John Paul, and she's starting the next chapter. And Christina joined us. Christine, Tricia, Bob's here. Suzette says, asking for prayers for all suffering with mental health issues. On our way home this afternoon, my husband and I came across a young lady who was ready to jump from a bridge. She was sent to the hospital. Thank goodness she got sent to the hospital. Absolutely. Let's pray for her. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Let's see, Catherine Lewandowski says, hi, Father Lombard. My niece came through the procedure just fine. Thanks for the prayers. And Kathy had asked for prayers, and I told her I was going to pray to Blessed Guadalupe Ortiz de Landazuri, who was, she is the first lay member of Opus Dei to be beatified, and the first woman, and she's from Spain, but she worked in Mexico. She got the work started in Mexico, and she helped San Jose Maria run the women's section worldwide. She was a chemist.
I was going to say, was she the chemist?
Got a doctorate.
Extremely bright.
Yeah, really bright. And she
Amazingly bright.
had heart disease that came a little bit from childhood, from some rheumatoid fever. And then she got bit by some horrible thing in Mexico when she was in there for 6 years, which caused all kinds of problems, malaria, all these things. And so she worked extremely hard, but was very bright. So, anyways, so I've been praying to her for a lot for things. So, let's see. Martha's here. Matt Wynn is here. Hello, Matt. Valerie's here. Susan Bill joined us. Callie Kaiser says, wonderful, sounds like Father Riley will fit right in. Woo-woo! Father Riley's only disadvantage is that he's skinny.
He's going to replace Guillermo.
He's
we
the
have
balance
to have
guy.
the token skinny priest in the
I
rectory.
know, we do. We can't all be this joyful. But actually, Father's just as joyful. Also, Father will be working as well at the retreat center. He's primarily here as parochial vicar, but Most groups that come to San Damiano Retreat Center, and that's run, it's part of our Sacred Heart Empire because Deacon Mark Maines, who's our deacon, runs it. But most groups bring their own priests, you know, for retreats, for confessions and mass. But sometimes they need priests for different things, so Father will be able to help with that too.
You know, if I could just go back to one point, Father, you made a minute ago, was
Yeah.
asked for prayer for that person that was in a mental health institution. I'll tell you, I have over the years gone to several of them, and I remember a couple of the first times I went, I was extremely nervous and very uncomfortable. Frankly, I was a little afraid, and that's putting it mildly. But, you know, we cannot forget these people, whatever their affliction may be. You know, God in the richness of His mercy can reach into the depths of our soul and heal any wounds. And sometimes He uses psychology, other times medication, and sometimes medical doctors, although psychiatrists are also doctors. So,
Yeah,
you know, we should never forget the good that they do.
absolutely,
We should-
yeah.
And that we should try to assist them in any way possible.
For
That they should
body
never
and
be,
soul.
never be
So, yeah.
forgotten.
Absolutely. Beth joined us, Patricia's here, Joan's here, Anne Marie's here, Cecil's here, Rita, Ralph, Wanda, Virginia joined us. Kathy says, I see at least 2 of you got haircuts, LOL. Well, I get haircuts too, you just can't tell. So, but, so anyways, what else we got going on here? Wanda joined us, I think I mentioned that. So we're excited, and then tomorrow, well, we've had 2 weekends now of masses, and we have to bounce back and forth between the gym and the church, but thanks be to God, so far everything has worked out. Our great staff and volunteers and ushers, and everybody's been amazing, and our deacons, and our deacon candidate, Rich Fossler, who's worked so hard with our RCIA this year and coordinating that. And then we're doing many, not all, but many of our sacraments for RCA will be tomorrow night. We're having an extra vigil, kind of like the Easter vigil, tomorrow night after our regular vigil mass, because there is a special vigil for Pentecost, which is often not done, but it's a really beautiful mass. It's not as long as the Easter vigil. It doesn't have like 9 readings. It has like 6, or 5, so it's short. And then, so we'll do that, and then we'll have baptisms and confirmations, first communions. We have some professions of faith, people who are coming into the church, and we have a couple other. We had another private mass this week for one family, and then we have a couple that are in the works that'll be a little bit later on in the year. So it's been great. So I feel like we're all pros now because the rest of the diocese is opening up this weekend with masses all over the place. So everybody gets to kind of dive into that. And we're kind of like, yeah, we're all pros with that here at Sacred Heart.
Been there, done that,
Yeah, exactly.
so to speak.
And the Hispanic community is really sad because Deacon Guillermo, who's taken such great care of them, way better than us, he's moving on. They're going to all follow him to bless the sacrament. Or
It's too far away for them to follow me.
Oh, no, it's not.
So, it'll be good. Let's see, Joan's joining us. Bob says I'm not sure, Bob, I think there's a typo here. Something to Virginia for Pentecost. It's been 3 months of staying mostly inside. COVID-19 is riskier in Virginia than New York, but will come and remain distanced for divine liturgy. Please pray for my safe travel. Okay, so I think it may travel to Virginia. So Bob will pray for you, absolutely. Bill's here. Yes, okay, great. I may travel to Virginia for Pentecost. Excellent. Emily's here, Jackie's here. What else?
Well, the Archdiocese of New York is Bishop Cardinal Timothy Dolan.
Yes.
They're still closed. Now, they may be having adoration, but they're certainly not having public masses, and that is going to remain closed for at least immediate how long? Difficult to say because it being the epicenter of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, I'm going to check here the Virginia coronavirus cases. I'm always checking those numbers. And it looks like, okay, so we've hit some high spots, but let's see, on the 28th there was only 1,100 cases, so we'll see if we're kind of leveling off, because Virginia has been a hot spot. We got a Google message, hang on, just a minute, he had a message from Jose Angel Contreras saying hello and good luck to you,
Oh, thank you.
but it's been deleted. So, let's see here. Any other questions?
You know, one hopeful sign, Father, was when I was in the hospital the other day, I actually had to go and give last rites to a COVID patient, as I mentioned in the staff meeting, and you visited one, I visited now two. I know Stefan Starzinski's probably visited dozens.
Yeah.
I spoke to one of the doctors and nurse. I don't know exactly how many patients are there, but most of them are recovering, so, you know, please God, that's a wonderful sign. In some cases, they may pass, and that is obviously always tragic, but most of them are recovering, so that's a good sign.
Yes. We're gonna go from the sublime to not so sublime. Anne Marie asks a food-related question. Do you all eat donuts? Well, Anne Marie, we have mastered the art of eating donuts, at least I have. But right now, in the world of low carbing and keto, we avoid these things. I mean, there are keto versions of some of these things. And she asked about the Apple House, which of course, if people don't know, in Front Royal, on exit 13 by Linden, you have the Apple House, which makes apple donuts, which are amazing, and I could eat about 5 boxes of those in one setting by myself. So get behind me, Satan. I don't need those, and I love them. But no, right now I'm waiting until I can see my feet again before I eat some donuts.
Did you ever go to Sugar Shack in Fredericksburg?
No, I don't think I
That was at the bottom of the hill as you went into the downtown area, and that was a
Yeah, it was
coffee.
newer when I left.
It was
yeah.
a coffee and donut place there. I only went there a couple of times for coffee. They did have donuts. The donuts were good there. I only had maybe once donuts there.
I love Duck Donuts down in Outer Banks. Those are great, and those came up to Northern Virginia. They're great. Bernadette says, it's been working well at St. Peter's. Father Barris is doing a great job. Oh, absolutely. Father Barris is totally dedicated, great parish. You guys have a good setup out there, man. So, Bob says, no mass, but I have receiving communion at a closed divine liturgy. So, well, that's great. Mary joined us, Jennifer's here, Ursula joined us. Let's see. Kimberly says, hello everyone, miss seeing you all and hope to be at church soon. Yeah, we miss you too, and I hope you've been able to watch a little bit. It's not the same watching online, but you know, we've been kind of easing back into daily masses and the Sunday masses, and so it's good. Joan says, Paul and I just came back from Old Town Winchester with everyone else in Winchester. We had dinner celebrating our 49th anniversary. Hey, congratulations, Joan.
That's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. We'll drop to the Rectory chat and come meet you downtown, and we'll have a good time. Joan says, best of luck, Deacon. Don't forget us.
Oh.
Don't forget your crazy country cousins out in Winchester. As my friend says, we live in Winchester, out behind God's back. So, you know.
Loco.
I told the Hispanic community yesterday, I had a great time here.
Yeah.
And everything that I learned here is going to be useful somewhere else. So
You're going to be streaming some. You're going to introduce Rectory chats and Bless the Sacrament. You can get
so
them
I
all.
will not forget about Winchester.
Yes. Kimberly says, now you all have me wanting a donut. Yeah, no kidding, me too. And Kimberly says, been watching online. Happy anniversary to Joan and Paul. All right, what else we have here? Jose Angel said, saludos para Bernardo, mis mejores deseos para el diácono Guillermo, lo vamos a extrañar. We are going to miss him, absolutely, and big dreams for him. And then Dan says, speaking of donuts, have you ever tried Straits donuts? No, I have not. Where are Straits donuts? I haven't heard of that. I've had duck donuts. I mean, I like any kind of donuts. We should have once we, like, in 2 years from now, when we've lost weight, we could have a donut show where we talk about all the donuts we love.
Jelly donuts.
Exactly. Ooh, okay. So anyways, so Greeley's here. Mary joined us. Mary Grace Shaper joined us. So, what else? So we have to get ready. The deacon, we're shoving him out the door to go on retreat. And then we got to get his rooms ready for Father Riley. And we're going through all this stuff. We are having a modified summer at Sacred Heart Camp this summer, SASH. We're doing following all the phase 1 guidelines, very small. But that word's been getting out. Chris Ricketts has been working amazing on that. And then Erica Palazza, Mrs. Palazza, our head of school, our principal here at Sacred Heart Academy, she's been doing amazing work with our teachers. The e-learning, we blew everybody out of the water. I'm sorry, I don't want to toot their horn. And so they're finishing up the school year, and then we're going to have a baccalaureate mass graduation for our 8th graders. And so the school's getting ready. Normally we would use the school for SASH, but this year, because of a lot of the different dynamics with cleaning and CDC. We just want to kind of avoid any difficulties there, so we're using Downey Hall and some other options outside. So that will be good, and we've survived. Can you believe it was like 8 weeks or whatever, 9 weeks of that COVID quarantine, saying masses downstairs, streaming masses. So it's good to be back in the church. Let's see here. Anne Marie says, so if not those evil items of donuts, favorite coffee. Father, do you have a favorite coffee?
It's always been Starbucks, but recently I've been going more to McDonald's. I get a macchiato there, and it's pretty good.
Excellent.
And the coffee machine is good. I'll drink that.
We got our K-Cups, and we also, I splurged a while back, we got a coffee maker that makes espresso, so you can have an Americano. If you want to, you can froth the milk. And so the different kinds of beans we can use for that, the K-Cups.
I do remember being in Jerusalem, man. Whatever had Jerusalem espressos there, man, that'd put hair on your chest. Ooh.
Woo-hoo.
That'd wake you up right away. If you were dead sleep, you'd be like, oh, okay, and you're ready to go.
When did you go to Jerusalem?
Oh gosh, that was in Fredericksburg, so about maybe 3 years ago, I guess, 3 or 4.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we took a parish trip there. It was very nice. I would definitely go back in the future if we can.
Excellent. Yes, I was supposed to go to the Holy Land this summer, but that didn't work out because of all this craziness.
Well, I was told too my German trip has been rescheduled for 2022 if I want to do that, so we'll see.
Excellent, you can go on that. Let's see here. We got some other questions here. Hang on. We have another good question about donuts. Of course, it seems like tonight's
all the
theme
heavy,
is
all the
donuts.
serious stuff tonight.
Absolutely, I'd rather talk about donuts, even though I can't eat them. Diane says, Father Lundberg, Diane from Alexandria, I credit or blame you for introducing me to Krispy Kreme donuts when you were a seminarian here at St. Mary's in Old Town Alexandria.
Nice.
Yes, and Diane, I don't know if I ever told you about this dessert that you've got to try with Krispy Kreme donuts. It's totally not healthy, but came from a diner in Charlottesville at UVA. And what you do is you take like day-old Krispy Kreme donuts. This is so healthy. It's so healthy. And you heat up some butter in a saute pan. And you're going to saute the old Krispy Kreme donuts in the butter. What it does is it caramelizes the sugar. So it makes kind of a caramelized, kind of like creme brulee kind of coating with the sugar. Then you put it in a bowl. We don't eat this here right now because I'm trying to lose weight. Put a scoop of ice cream on top, some chocolate syrup, and some whipped cream.
That would be good.
And so everybody run out right now to your local store with a mask on and get some Krispy Kreme donuts, and for the skinny ones of you who have metabolisms, and make a sauteed Krispy Kreme donut with ice cream. It is so good. So let's see here. So I know on that, very good. The Rulies here. Good evening, Father Deacon. Missed you guys on Wednesday and was surprised to see you online this evening. Yes, I apologize. We rebooted this week the Rectory chat tonight. We've been advertising, which was my fault, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we were only doing Wednesdays, and this week Wednesday wasn't going to work. So we will stick with Wednesdays and then try to figure out when we can maybe do another day. Let's see here. Kelly says, the joys of being a pastor, getting a fabulous coffee machine. Yes, you're right. I totally splurged on that. I figured in the long run we save money from buying fancy coffees elsewhere. We can have them at home cheaper. James joined us. Jane Canad is here. Kathy's here. Tricia says, wondering when those of us that are immunocompromised can safely return to Mass. How can we possibly know it's safe? Trying very hard not to be envious of those who can go now. That's it's a good question, Tricia. Some people go to daily Mass, and we can space out a little bit more. But send me a private message, and we'll see what we can figure out. Diane says, good grief. I assume that's about the donut dessert. Suzette says, thankful for gluten issues, and I'm allergic to chocolate. That's going to save you a lot.
Wish I had that problem.
Let's see here. Kimberly says, amazing experience with e-learning. Hats off to the staff and teachers and Mrs. Palazza. Absolutely. Where is the Apple place called in front row? Okay, Kimberly, it's the Apple House, and it's at exit 13. So you're coming off 66, take exit 13, and you go in towards the gas stations, and when you turn there, there's like, I think a 7-Eleven gas station, like a Corals or something, and across is a Exxon or Mobil. But anyways, next to the 7-Eleven is the Apple House restaurant. So that is, I want to say that's 55 going into town, and so it's well worth it for skinny people with metabolisms. I can highly recommend it. Kimberly says, it's my hometown in Alexandria. Absolutely. Are you giving communion? Yes. Yes, we do. We have Mass and we have communion. Let's see here. So Dan, back about more donut stuff. Okay, these are straight donuts. They're a donut food truck that drives up and down the valley. Yes, I have heard about this. I think the Schlomers, Mark Schlomer was raving about this. I think it's every Friday. They're in Winchester, usually down at the south end of town by the Sportsplex. Yes, as you can tell, we would be better off going to the Sportsplex. You go to the donuts, but he said, my bad, it's spelled Strites Donuts. They're the best fresh donuts I've ever had. That's what I have been told. Right now I'm going to believe your gospel truth, because if I eat them, I won't be walking straight, I'll be rolling straight. So here we go. Let's see what else. So Anna's here, and Carol's joined us. Ron joined us. Speaking of Ron, you could please pray for my Uncle Ron. He's not doing well. He is in the hospital in Washington State, and it doesn't look very good. He's might be going to hospice. So if you could pray for him, our family had a lot of suffering this quarantine COVID time. So his cancer has spread, but we're praying for healing and for them. What else? So we have Father Riley coming. We have sacraments going on. And we have our new staff. Sharon Gormas, our amazing office manager, is now started up on her new position at St. Bridget's, which is a daughter parish of St. Goodhart. And she's still also helping doing training for our new staff of Kathleen Haynes and Laura Ricketts. And so that's been a good adjusting. I mean, I don't know how good it is for them, but it's been great for us.
Well, I wonder if either you or the deacon could comment. Somebody asked me a question this morning about, I think it was, is it Howard County in Baltimore, that they had put a rule in place that apparently affected religious services, that you couldn't distribute communion.
Okay, sorry. Deacon will be back in a minute. One of these places, I don't know if it's Howard County, but there is a place in Baltimore where they ruled in that county because of some reason that they were not going to be able to distribute any kind of food at a service, a religious service.
Apparently it was true. I saw something on YouTube or in the news about that this morning, because someone had asked me about that, and I thought it was rather strange, but I think, is it Governor Hogan? Larry Hogan, I think is the governor, remember?
Yeah, I don't think that was his...
I don't know if he's going to come up, they're going to come up with a new plan, or they're going to permit that at obviously at some point.
It's pretty strong, because I haven't seen that anywhere else. So, so that thankfully we haven't had that problem here. And everything overall has worked out pretty well for us here. It's been, I was afraid either we're going to have tons of people at Mass, or we wouldn't have enough space, because we have, even with our overflow in each location, the gym, Mass at the gym or Mass in the church, we still are, below the 50% number, So thankfully that's worked out okay overall, and people have really been great, about coming in.
By the way, this morning at the 8:30, we had a really good crowd. I'd say close to 100, maybe more. Slightly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the 7 was like, but
I think a lot of people too right now are going sometimes to the daily Mass because they don't want to necessarily go on the weekend or whatever. So this could be crazy. We have another weekend with Masses, and then we have the deacon leaves Sunday night on Pentecost to go do his retreat, and he'll be over at the retreat center, and then we have the ordinations next weekend, and the weekend after that, about 3 weekends after that, Father Riley will be here. So let's see here. All right, good questions here. Can we change the way youth group and confirmation is done? Sure. I mean, we're always looking for new things. Like mix the two, okay, very good. Also, why isn't there anything for under 5 unless you pay $1,000 a month for your preschool? And lastly, can you do a Sunday Mass or something at the hospital for hospital workers? There's no service for us that work 12-hour shifts. That is a great question, Patricia. We could potentially look into that, now that we're gonna have 3 priests, we'll have to see, I'm not gonna commit to it right now. But what we could probably do maybe is looking eventually into having maybe a communion service over at the hospital.
I know when I was at St. Ambrose with Father Fisher, Father Merkel was the chaplain. He would offer a Saturday vigil, I think at like 7 or 7:30 in the evening. A couple times I filled in, wasn't often, but so it was kind of nice, just saying mass for the nurses and doctors.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We are trying to expand our preschool program this year. I think we're trying to go to yet another year lower of preschool, so we can look into that. And the way with youth group and confirmation, confirmation right now follows the diocesan policies for preparation. It's usually a 2-year program, and we'd like to look. We're going to shift it. It used to be that you were confirmed in here in the fall of after you finish 8th grade, and so then the fall, so your kids are already in high school, so they're freshmen, they get confirmed, and we are in the process of shifting it so that would be in the fall of 8th grade year. So the prep, instead of starting in 7th grade through 8th grade, it would start going in from 6th grade and 7th grade, and then you would get confirmed at the beginning of your 8th grade year. So we're looking into that. I mean, if I could move it a little bit earlier, if the diocese ever looks into that, I would think that would be great. I think confirming kids at a little bit younger age would be good.
I totally agree. I would like to see it at a younger age.
And right now we're planning for how we're going to do first communions this summer. So these are good questions. Thank you, Patricia. I will get back to you. I'm going to copy that and look into that so we can see what we can do with that. And what else? Got some weddings coming up. Else here? Anything here? Did I miss that? Nope. Let's see. Kermit says, Howard County, the way it was phrased sounded like the celebrant would not be able to consume the Eucharist. Wow, that's cool. Crazy. Chris has joined us too. So I don't know how long that's going to go on there. I don't know what was behind that, because most places have when they've allowed churches to open up. In Illinois, that governor was talking about not having church for like a year, and then somebody sued, and then he came out with saying there's like basically no restrictions. I mean, you can go to open up church again, and he did say they're going to have some guidelines, but they were suggestions, they were not requirements. So something must have gotten through there.
Somebody came to me this morning with a question about, could the host be affected with COVID? I just said, look, even if it is possible, I mean, that the virus can survive in surfaces for however long, you're not obligated to receive.
I mean, the only right, yes, someone doesn't. Again, something we don't think about very much anymore. 100 years ago, a lot of people wouldn't go to communion very frequently at all, a couple times a year, and so the idea of daily communion or frequent communion has always been encouraged now in the last 100 years under Pius X and moving forward. But it's certainly possible. Our Sunday. Right now we don't have an obligation because we've been released from the obligation. We do have to keep the Lord's Day holy. You don't have to go to Mass, even though it's available right now. It's good to come if you can, but you have to be careful with your immunocompromised situations or people in high-risk categories. But I guess there's a scenario where one of us gets COVID, and if we had COVID, I guess, the theory you could possibly spread that by breathing on the Blessed Sacrament. But right now we don't touch. I mean, we clean our hands and all that. But right now, if we started having symptoms or had reason to believe we'd been exposed, then we would get tested, and if we're positive, then we'd have to quarantine for 14 days. And so that would bring everything to a halt, because probably since we live together in the same rectory, everything would shut down. So we're praying. Believe me, I pray that neither one of us gets sick. There are some priests who've been sick. Let's see here. Claire says, we feel very abandoned. Feels like the church doesn't care. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people's perception of things and their feelings of things doesn't correspond with actually the efforts of many of the people in the church, and the priests, the bishop. But there's certainly a group of people who have perceived it that way. And I know from working with the bishop that he's working hard to have, you know, the churches open the whole time. And now this weekend, all the masses other churches are gonna have mass up in Northern Virginia in phase one. So there's the whole Diocese of Arlington is now open for mass this weekend. So I'm curious to see, get reports from other priests, how that goes. I mean, I wonder if some of them started already today, because I think it lifted last night at midnight. So I think now people have more of a tangible awareness of all the things the priests have been doing, especially in the Diocese of Arlington. We've been doing a lot. And other places where they shut down churches and they didn't have confessions and they didn't have
confessions, funerals, baptisms, weddings. I mean, we've really kept pretty much a regular schedule with most of it.
But absolutely, I mean, the fact that people couldn't have mass, we've talked about this, you know, if we were in the pews, if we were lay people, we would be mad.
I worry about, I've said many times, Father, and I think you'd agree, that I worry about the people whose faith is perhaps weak, or they're sort of on the fringe, so to speak. I hate to use that phrase, on the fringe, but
just living in the life today in our culture, you can just have weak faith because everything's beating you down about being Catholic, so being pro-life, being Christian.
And so I worry that some may not come back. It's sad. You never ever want to see that.
Yeah,
it might happen.
Well, you look at all the tension too, because I mean, you know, people with health issues and people who are older. So many of them right now, if you just get a steady diet of the news reports, you know, people live in fear. It's understandable, but they do. They're afraid to go to their house. They're afraid they're going to die. You know, I mean, this thing, you know, the news, you know, presumably the news is trying to give the benefit of the doubt. They're trying to cover things. But, I mean, it's very interesting. You've traveled into Northern Virginia. It's a very different vibe than out here. Now, granted, Northern Virginia's a hot spot. Fairfax County, Prince William County, Alexandria, Arlington. So the cases are higher there. And out here it's much lower. But, you know, the impression I get from conversations is that people are just terrified, and then they're trying to, you know, they're following the guidelines, be safe at home, but then they're isolating. They're not in contact with other people. They don't see people.
I said this to someone today, but I'm sure I've said this in the past also. I think, and actually there was a woman on EWTN the other day who was a Catholic psychiatrist, an MD, and she was talking about rise of anxiety, fear, depression, potential suicide still. You know, all these things, eventually this is going to come out. I mean, yes, there's a financial cost, but there's also an emotional cost associated with not being able to participate in the faith completely, as well as a spiritual cost. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
No, and I think, I mean, coming out of this, there is, on one level, a huge opportunity. Because I think before, you know, when we were just busy, we were having masses all the time, and parish events, and running the school, and trying to get to the hospital, and funerals, and weddings, and marriage prep, all this stuff. So we were just busy, just running like a gerbil in the hamster wheel. Then, all of a sudden, this shuts down, and then people don't have access to the Eucharist, I mean, to receive physically. And then people are drilled into this, you know, be afraid, and like Claire's saying, the experience is the church isn't there for us. Church isn't providing mass. We're left to fend for ourselves, you know. So that's very real, people experience. And then, meanwhile, we're trying to figure out how do you stream, how do you go online, how do you do all this stuff, how do you, I just look back, I can't believe what we've covered like in 8 or 9 weeks. But then you look at the impact, I think, on society, like you say. People, it was hard enough just to hold the faith in our culture.
Right.
Then it's taken away from you. And then the culture's dogpiling on you.
I think you had read this book. I have not read it, but I read a similar book on Walter Scissor, Cardinal d'Antoine.
Yes.
Who was imprisoned in Vietnam, I think, for years. And again, probably just, you know, might have been able to say Mass on the sneak if he could even get bread and wine. And, you know, amazing what these people suffered and went through and kept the faith. And, in the most, frankly, forgive me, hellish conditions.
No, absolutely. Let's see what else we were saying. Someone said, please ask the bishop about restoring the order of the sacraments of initiation in the diocese. So this is a question about the original sequence, which is preserved in the Eastern churches, that you would get baptism, confirmation, and then the Eucharist. So when we do RCIA, that's the order: baptism, you're confirmed, and you receive Holy
Well,
Communion.
that was, as you mentioned, that was changed under Pius X.
Right, because he lowered the age of first Holy Communion.
Exactly, and I had actually maybe you've met some of the older Catholic folks who got confirmation at 6 or 7.
Yes.
I kind of like that.
I
I
do
wish
too.
we could too, but
Right now, I mean, the bishop, it's been brought up, I mean, the question's studied. It's interesting because a friend of mine, a priest, talked about how in another diocese, they did lower the age. They restored this order of baptism, confirmation,
Right.
communion. So the kids were getting confirmed at an earlier age, maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, which would be wonderful ostensibly. But then the problem was they still lost them after that because right now it's not the best model, but we kind of string people along. Okay, you get your baptism, you get your first penance, your first communion, and then we try to keep you this carrot and stick. Come to confirmation,
yes.
and it's kind of they're kind of checked out anyways. But you kind of stretch them out, and then you think, well, if we could get them earlier, you get the grace of the sacrament,
and they might be a little more malleable
right,
too,
and open to the grace of the Spirit. But then in the diocese, some places where they've started this, they then got to how do you pick up the football and run with it? So you get them confirmed earlier, you get that grace, but then the culture's still there. So it's how do you continue formation post confirmation?
And I think this is for maybe people like you or other people who do catechetics, or Bishop Barron, people who are very creative, very bright. We really have to think of ways that we can, like we have to do service hours or go to the nursing homes or soup kitchens. All these things are good. But we really have to engage them more deliberately, I think at these younger ages, to get them to start thinking about this mindset, as opposed to always just, going on the phones or going on the computer or friendships or sports. And some of these things, not all of them are bad, clearly, but they can be distractive. They are somewhat worldly, again, not that they're bad per se, but you're right. Once we give them the sacrament, it's like, okay, I've reached the milestone, check that off.
Right.
And there's something wrong with that. And
Sure.
I have, and I frankly, look, I will make a total honest confession. There's nothing bad here, but I was confirmed when I was 12 years old. I had Baltimore Catechism. I was the last group in Florida. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I really knew nothing. Now, I wasn't a bad kid.
No,
I was
something.
just poorly catechized, maybe.
I had a good CCD teacher getting me ready, and I was clueless. If I had to evaluate myself at that age,
Oh, absolutely.
I was a material heretic. I didn't know anything.
I probably was too. And so I don't think we have the answers per se, but I think we've got some really talented people and some minds that we have to sort of think up of,
Right.
okay, from say roughly the age of say 10 or 12 till say the age of say 18, because most kids go to college at 18. We have to think in these say several years, what can we do? There's youth groups, SASH is another new good program,
Right.
and there are probably many other things that we can try to engage them on to keep them connected to the faith.
Yeah.
Because when they get out of high school or go up to college, that's another temptation. There we have chaplains, we have Focus and other missionaries that can be helped with that. But I think we're still struggling that roughly 8 to 10 to 18 range of what do we do with these kids? And I don't want to say we don't know, but we haven't really come up with an effective way, I think, of dealing with that. That's my opinion.
No, it's new territory because the culture and this post-Christian culture and everything that reinforced it before is gone. Yeah. And then people aren't evangelized; they don't know the faith. So
And sadly, the breakdown of the family too.
Let's see here. Keep going here. Michelle says, greetings from Peoria, fathers.
Nice. Fulton Sheen country.
That's right. That's who you're going to stay with if you went
We're hoping he's still going to be beatified someday in my lifetime.
Claire says, to paraphrase Flannery O'Connor, the Eucharist keeps me as a barely tolerable person. Without the Eucharist, there is no life. This is true. Emma's here. Patricia's here. Claire says, why didn't all the priests justify our bishop? That's a good question, Claire. Because we make promises to the bishop to be obedient.
Yeah, no, you can't.
We're not independent operators. And this is the way our Lord set up the church, that we promise respect and obedience to the bishop.
And his lawful successors too.
Yeah, and we give him, and we should give him the benefit of the doubt about the decisions that he has to make and what he is working with. I can put it to you this way, my experience. I know as a pastor that I've had to make decisions which people did not understand. And they're like, why are you doing that? And there are things that that I'm not at liberty to discuss. There are things that I know privately, I mean, not under like the seal or anything, but that I'm not at liberty to reveal. And there are prudential reasons why I have to take a course of action. I may even want to go a different way, but I can't right now. So I have to bide my time. And so there's times I know, just on a local parish level, that I have to make decisions which are part of a plan to help the parish. But if I want to reach this goal, I can't necessarily go from 0 to 60 overnight. And so there are times where people are going to say, and they are legitimate questions that they have, and I'm not at liberty to answer them. And so they have a right to ask the question. They have the right to be upset with me. I'm not free to answer them. I'm not free to reveal the reasons all the time that I have to act as I do. And so then on a higher level, the bishop, he's operating with a lot of different things at work. I know he loves the diocese. He loves the faith. He's not happy that people can't go to the Eucharist or couldn't. He was acting out of charity. I mean, I know people that I've talked to have thought, oh, is the bishop just like bending the knee to the governor, just doing what the governor wants? No, he wasn't, but one could get that impression. You can see why someone might think that, but I also know too, I kind of wished at times we got the word out more about what was going on in the diocese. Because compared to other dioceses, where they shut their churches, there was no prayer available, you couldn't even go visit the Blessed Sacrament. They were banning baptisms and anointing of the sick, everything was here.
One diocese, which will remain unnamed, the bishop in the diocese says, well, if you have to go to the hospital for danger of death, or if there's a child that's dying, call us first for permission.
Yeah.
You don't need permission in emergencies. In danger of death, you baptize. Or give the sacraments.
And I don't know, Father, what you think. I think God is going to bring a lot of good out. I am confident that God is working in a big way, because I think a lot of these questions are coming up. People are asking these questions. The sacraments are back. I mean, I think, this has not been a good time. It's not been an easy time. I think it's been very hard. But I think God is working in a big way. And then Guillermo walks in. Bum, bum.
Well, I think too, you can look at the sacraments, they'll take a slightly different tack. So you have form, intention, and matter, and you have a minister. The church defines within the sacramental framework that there has to be certain things that you must do to confect or to make the grace come about. And that's what the church says. So we do what the church says, and we follow the lawful authority, which is the Pope and the bishops. And so, yes, the laity has certainly struggled and suffered, but this bishop in particular, you know him better than I do. I think he is a very, very good man. And I think if you are a bishop today, you want to be a true servant, you're going to suffer also. And I think in his own way, I can only imagine he has also suffered. Not obviously in the way that the laity has, because they've been, haven't been able to attend Mass publicly, but I can only imagine what's on his plate and the difficult burden of the decisions he has to make, of which, as you say, he has knowledge and information we don't.
And it's been interesting,
So I think we have to trust him.
Here in the parish level, I mean, it's hard to trust anybody today. It's hard to trust family members, authority figures, religious leaders. There are plenty of reasons why people are not going to give the benefit of the doubt to lots of people. But some of the communications we have here at the parish level, we have people who contact us and who ask very good questions, and and say it's kind of Braveheart. We should be fighting the governor. We should be fighting the civil leaders. We should be pushing back. That there is no real reason to wear the mask, all these kinds of questions. Then we have people who contact us who have compromised immune systems, who are nurses who work with people dying from COVID, who are people who are doctors and who have all kinds of questions, and they have questions. Why isn't it required that everyone wear a mask? And again, these are good questions. I don't want to say they're apples and oranges, but I mean, there are two very powerful kind of trends. And both sides have very good points. And you're trying to figure out, how can I drive down the middle of the road here when there's this concern over here, which is very important, and this concern over here.
These are all well-intentioned good
Absolutely.
People. This is not malicious in any
No, and then the questions are good. I mean, depending on your perspective or your viewpoint or what you're going through and what you're suffering or suffering with other people, this is like, I don't understand how we do X, or why do we allow this, or why don't we do this? So, I know the bishop's been very engaged with leaders around the diocese, clergy, laity, medical people, to get input, to get advice, as he makes decisions. So, again, it's one of these things where I kind of feel like, I don't want to say it's a Rorschach test, but it's kind of like we walk in a room and there's a sculpture in front of us, and depending on what side you're sitting, you see it from a different angle.
Yeah.
It's objectively a reality, but, oh no, it looks this way, no, it looks this way, or no, it looks this way, you know. Everybody is seeing part of this, and I think that, you know, the bishop's got this bird's eye view, and he's got the responsibility for the souls of the faithful and for the parishes, and also within that is God's plan, you know, is the common good and legitimate authority. I think about the fact where Jesus, our Lord, is before Pilate, and Pilate says, don't you know I have authority to kill you or give you life? And Jesus says to him, you know, you would have no authority over me if it were not given to you by my Father in heaven. Our Lord goes and dies and is obedient to the civil authority when he could have wiped him out, you know. And I think about the Japanese, you know, for centuries they didn't have priests, they had no they had the sacrament of baptism and they had the sacrament of marriage. And when missionaries returned hundreds of years later, they found these Catholics who had passed on the faith, but they hadn't received communion for centuries. You know, where Charles Borromeo closed down the churches for 2 years in Milan. Now he had public mass outside, but people weren't able to receive communion. So I mean, again, they're all really good questions, and depending on who's asking, I can say, well, this is the approach for this, or this is why we're doing that. You know. So, anyways,
I think too, isn't it in the Diary of Saint Faustina somewhere where there's a specific instance of something where I think it was her confessor director told her to do something and she didn't really want to do it, but she was obedient, and when the Lord appeared to her, you know, he said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, you pleased me so much because of your obedience.
Yeah.
We hear that expression, you know, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I think the Lord also desires us as servants, if we're really servants, obedience.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really here for the question, but
we're just talking about kind of like the suffering that the faithful have gone through because they couldn't receive the Eucharist. You know, it's not like the Eucharist is an optional thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we, you know, on one level we say, oh, you should get to Mass, you should get to daily Mass, and then we say, oh, well, 2 months you can't receive the Eucharist. You know, you can do it. So I mean, people are really suffering because they can't receive the grace of the sacraments.
Yeah, but I was thinking as I was hearing your answers that it's a great time for us to grow in our faith and to realize that nothing escapes the providence of God, and that this is actually practical for our lives in everything, because sometimes we go through real sufferings and real trials and we don't know why and we don't understand, and sometimes it's just good for us to say, well, I don't understand this, I don't know what's going on, I think this was a wrong decision, but because I believe in the providence of God, I know that just by the sake of being obedient, I'm being faithful to God's providence, and I think that really helps, even in the midst of suffering. I mean, I don't want to take away. Right, I don't want to take away all the suffering from the people who receive communion during this time.
Let's see. So Claire says, "Yes, I know you're still giving the sacraments to a select few people." Well, we had private mass. We could not have more than 10 people at a private mass, and the bishop's general concern over that, to paraphrase, was that, you know, if you have a small parish, so like some parishes are small, and they have a few hundred families, there would be a way, conceivably, all during that time, that you could have had a family at a time, you know, come for Mass, be able to receive, things like that. When you're in a parish with 3,000 families, you know, then my rationale was, if we're having Mass and I can only have 10 people or less, so then I think, okay, we have a deacon, we have a deacon's wife, we have a transitional deacon, we have a deacon candidate and his wife, we might have a lector or a cantor, occasionally I'd have a server. If we did the extraordinary form Mass, you know, we'd have some siblings who would serve, they're from the same family, and we'd have a cantor or two doing the chants. So, in very short order, okay, I have these people I can rationalize because they have this ministerial role or whatever. But then, you know, as a general rule, it's like, how would I go through and decide which family could come or not? So it was a struggle. But then, like, we had funerals and burials, and then occasionally we did have some baptisms even at that point, but they were always a small group, less than 10. Or when we went to the hospital to anoint, or the COVID patients to anoint. So, I mean, we were trying to work with there, but let's see, we'll keep going here with some of these questions.
And I can attest, because Father, we talked about this many times, and we really even did try to come up with ideas, if at all possible, say, how could we get, you know, as many people through in the next several weeks, not knowing how long the pandemic would last, and Father did everything he reasonably could, I think.
Well, and then too, like, we were trying to think, what would we do with RCIA? Maybe we do one candidate at a time.
Right.
Now that this lifted and we can have larger groups in the church, we're able to do, you know, an RCI Mass with the families and, you know, distance and everything, but still get pretty much majority, not everybody in. But let's see, but Claire points out, this has weakened our faith. It could weaken our faith, it's understandable. It can also strengthen our faith, because for a lot of us, you think about people go through war, you think about the Spanish Civil War, you think about the persecution of the church, we have to grow our interior life, because the pressures outside of us are only going to get stronger, and our Lord is still with us, and we can have interior life and talk to Him all the time, and grow in that relationship, even when we can only make spiritual communions. Like I was reading about Edith Stein when she got to Auschwitz, and she's writing in this journal that God is still with her, and that we can't go to Mass right now, or it was before they got there, but still.
She said they were traveling east.
Yeah, and they were saying we can make spiritual communions and pray. So
there was a beautiful story. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to the deacon about we mentioned this in the past. Padre Pedro Arrupe. So Padre Arrupe was at Ground Zero in I think it was at Nagasaki when the bomb went off, but the Jesuit house was downdraft, so the windows blew out. The Jesuits didn't get a scratch, none of them.
yes, that story is so good.
Arrupe was started medical school before he became a Jesuit. So they actually set up the first field hospital, and Father Arrupe, had to say Mass, and it was sad because, when he saw the bomb go off, he thought this could be the end of the world. And I remember he talked about turning around and saying to the people, Dominus vobiscum, and there's these charred bodies that were dying of sickness and radiation poison. All they could do was give them water. He said he prayed that Mass more than any Mass he ever prayed in his life. That was the most beautiful Mass he ever offered, I think, in his whole priesthood, he said. So, yes, I totally agree. Yes, people have been hurt. We don't want to see that. But I also think the Holy Spirit is working through this in some way, that there is strengthening, there will be renewal coming about.
Well, I think too, like these questions that the faithful are asking around the country, and that they're asking of the priests, and so, it's the movement of the Holy Spirit too. I don't mean to say like, oh, well, we'll just roll over and play dead. No, it's a real cross. It's a real struggle. And I can't say, oh, I know what you're going through. No, I don't know what you're going through. I haven't experienced it in the same way. I say Mass every day. But I also see that I think God will, like with all evils, He permits it to bring a greater good. And I do think that parts of the church in this country, I think, are going to collapse. I think parts of the church in this country are going to flourish. And I think, and I think people in the parish here, both Father Holmes and I, the first day we said Mass publicly, we both cried at Mass, because it's like, I didn't know how much I liked the faithful. I mean, I sound horrible.
And how much they liked us.
Yeah, or just to be able to see the Eucharist. Let's see here. Claire says, I'm terrified of hell. Yeah, the reality of not being able to get to confession. Now, in the Arlington Diocese, there were confessions available a lot of places. Yeah. But think about people who couldn't, get the sacraments. So the emotional cost is incalculable, the spiritual cost unfashionable. But again, I tend to think that here, I think a lot of good is coming out of this, but even though it's been a horrible suffering. See, Bob says the church has been extremely caring to me. You're up in New York, so I think you've got some good treatment there. Michael says, I'm getting confirmed tomorrow and will be receiving the Eucharist for the first time in months. These chats have helped me keep the course, and for that I thank you, fathers. Hey, you're welcome, Michael. Let's pray for each other, for all of us on this chat, because of what people are going through. Megan says, I am desperately waiting to hear from parishes and or our bishop about the killing in Minnesota and our commitment to promoting the dignity of all human persons in Catholic social teaching. Yeah, I haven't seen yet what Bishop has said yet. I imagine he's addressed this or going to address this.
The NCCB made a statement on it already, and they said obviously it was horrible and that justice must follow. The one officer today was just arrested and brought.
Yeah.
He is going to be tried for manslaughter, third-degree murder and manslaughter, I believe. So,
yeah. And
there probably will be other charges coming for the other police. I think, obviously, it was absolutely horrible what was done. It can be in no way justified. Whatever happened before the video that we saw, he was on the man's neck for several minutes until the man's nose was bleeding and he basically died. So, something has to happen.
Yeah.
These things cannot be tolerated.
And when I was driving to the cathedral, I was actually hearing the bishop's podcast.
Uh-huh. Oh, he's talking about it.
He talked about it, yeah. So if you want.
So it's on the podcast, and then I imagine that there's more going to be coming out.
Yep.
Because he and our communications director Billy Atwell are on top of these things. So let's see here. Megan says, any idea if that will be coming out soon? Well, it sounds like something's been started. but that there will be more. Carolyn says, coming late to the party, but all the Spinellis say hi to you all.
Oh, nice.
Hello, Spinellis. Kelly says, I'm pretty sure that Bishop Burbidge addressed Minnesota in his podcast this week, just out today.
And also, the FBI has opened an investigation with Department of Justice
Yes.
and Bishop
Uh,
Bill Barr,
Bill Barr,
the Attorney
Bishop
General.
Barr.
So, yeah, he's not a bishop, but he is a Catholic. He's a good man. So he's so that, and probably the other officers. It's highly likely that the others are going to be charged also. I would be shocked if they weren't.
Yeah.
They're at least accomplices legally.
Tricia said, I just read Scott Hahn's new book, Hope to Die,
Oh,
which
I'll read
explores
that.
the significance of death and burial from a Catholic perspective. He is strongly opposed to cremation. What are your thoughts on this? Well, I'd love to say something. Any thoughts you want to start with?
I think traditionally, most of the Jewish people, at least in Jesus' day, I don't think they permitted cremation, and up till at least I think Vatican II, I'm not certain. It was, I don't know if it was permitted or not. It was certainly probably frowned upon. At the very least, I would say, and we've both done hundreds of funerals with this, my brother. You should really have the body at least present for the ceremony in a casket. I think it's preferable that you have that for the sake, I think, of the family. There are obviously financial concerns, and once or twice when I was in Manassas, there was a family that couldn't afford a plot, so we had some extra plots, and we did donate a plot for cremated remains. And but I personally, I think it's at least preferable that you have the body physically present. You can rent a casket. If you want to cremate after that, that's up to the family.
Deacon, you're soon to be newly ordained. You want to dive into cremation?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest concern there is our belief in the resurrection of the body.
Yes.
And I think back in the days, we used to discourage people from doing cremation because it could be, in a way, a way to say that we don't like the body, or there's something wrong with the body, or we don't believe in the rest. But, I mean, theologically speaking, you can also say that even the people who has been cremated, I mean, they're going to have a resurrection of the body. Just because you've been cremated doesn't mean that you won't. But I think we have to safeguard this idea of the resurrection of the body. And my personal preference will be for us not to do it, because I think that really safeguards the idea that the cadaver is actually, it used to be a human being, and it's the reminder of us that that body had a soul and was a human being before. But again, the church permits it, and I think you can make a theological point saying that even the people who has been cremated will have the resurrection of the body. So
Yeah, it can't be a denial, certainly. You're absolutely right. It can't be sort of a Manichaean dualism, spirit or soul good, body bad. That would be abhorrent as Christians and Catholics.
Well, I'll stir the pot. I'll start first by saying the cremation is permitted, and it's very widespread, and it is allowed. The bare minimum that the church says is if someone were to deny publicly the resurrection of the body and be cremated, saying basically life's over, the body's useless, and it's not going to rise. I've never encountered that person. I know I'm sure there's people out there like that. But in those scenarios, we would have to deny a burial for that, or a Catholic funeral in that case. However, having said that, and I know lots of people watching or joining us are planning to cremate or have that in their will, and again, it is permitted. I got to make a point that it's permitted. It's not the mind of the church. The cremation was never allowed, as far as I know, and I obviously could be wrong, but it was never allowed up until mid-20th century, because we're holy. When Jesus was taken out from the cross, he wasn't burned. He was laid in a tomb, and he, in light of the resurrection, and 3 days later he rises. And we are baptized into his death and resurrection. Our bodies become holy. We are going to rise. So while the church as a mother in the post-Christian society in which we live, in which people aren't operating based on really Christian principles in terms of, a fullness of formation, understand that a lot of time, like Father says, it's a financial consideration. Funerals can be just very costly for a lot of reasons. So people choose this variety of reasons. But no, what the church wants for us is that we be buried, that we have the funeral rites of the church. That we have a funeral and that we be buried, because we're going to rise again. Now, someone could say, it's a good point, Father, doesn't the body break down in the tomb? It does. But again, a couple things to keep in mind about cremation. I don't want to be too tacky about this in this context, but when a person gets cremated, their body is burnt up. When someone says, I have the ashes of so-and-so, no, what you have is an urn with ground up bones. Because the body has been consumed by fire. It's been burnt. And it's not the ashes of so-and-so, it is the remains of the bones which have been ground up. Now, this is an extreme case of this, but let me give you an example, which is, Flannery O'Connor was all about writing outrageous things to get people's attention. She said, when someone's deaf, you have to shout. And she said, when someone's blind, you have to create outrageous characters to get their point. So this comes up all the time. Someone you know and loved passes away, and they get cremated. This is a very normal thing. It happens all the time. And they say, Father, I'd like to scatter their ashes. So-and-so would go fishing at this river. Or I've had a scenario. Someone I loved was a big football coach. We're scattering the ashes on the football field. Or, you watch The Way, about the Camino of Santiago, and this guy dies, young man dies, and his father, out of love for him, goes on the pilgrimage and scatters the ashes along the way. So let me give you an outrageous scenario. Someone loved the water or the lake, and they say, we're going to go scatter Father Bjorn's ashes at the lake. Fine. Now imagine if you said the following. Father Bjorn just died, and we're going to throw his leg into the lake. Like, how gross would that be? We're going to chop up his body and put it in the lake. We'd be horrified by this. But see, we've been accustomed to this idea, Deacon kind of alluded to it, that, okay, the person has died, their suffering is over, they're no longer here. We think of their spirit is free. We don't really think of it in terms of Christian. It's just sort of like, this part's over, now they're liberated, let's kind of scatter them to the winds. That thought process is very understandable, but it changes when we think about, okay, a person has run their course on earth. They've passed on from this life. They've gone before God for judgment, as we all will. They were baptized as a Christian. Their body will rise again. So we lay them to rest. They're sleeping in the sense that, right? They're looking forward to the resurrection. Our life doesn't end when we die. It just begins. Now, the church understands our cultural situation, and she tolerates this. But again, when we say tolerate, it means she permits it. She puts up with it. It's not the preference. The preference, the Christian ideal, is that when we got baptized at the font, we became incorporated into Jesus. You are a daughter or son of God. You are heirs to a royal inheritance. You've received eternal life. And at the end of our life, we lay the person to rest in light of looking forward to the resurrection. So again, after all my blather, yes, is cremation permitted? Yes. But in the long run, the educational challenge is to help people understand your dignity. You shouldn't be burnt up in a fire. You should be laid to rest. Now, many people can't afford it. Totally understand it. Many people don't have a plot. They don't have the money for it. They have to choose between, there's this model I would like to do, but it's extremely expensive. This is what I can afford. This is what I can do. It's fine. I know priests who've been cremated, so I don't mean to say, these lay people doing this. No, all kinds of people do it. I just would want to reorient us because we should live with hope. And I think a lot of times people say, you have life, you have a few short years on earth, the person dies, we don't have them around anymore, and we're torn. We want to be with them forever, we want to believe there's an eternity where we'll see them, but we also act as if that's not the case, because now that they're dead, we'll cremate and distribute the ashes. And again, I think for people it's an act of reverence in a strange way. They say, dad loved golfing, or mom loved the mountains or the beach. This is why I want to do this. But it's also the same question people have all the time. Could we get married at the beach? The beach is beautiful. But it's kind of like if you said, and you can argue this, Father, we're going to have a family dinner on the beach. That'd be kind of cool. That'd be kind of romantic. That'd be kind of neat. But generally, you have a family dinner around the dining table in your home, or in your kitchen, or at your favorite restaurant. You go there because it's the atmosphere. Well, God's house is His temple. And not just in a formal way, in a very intimate way, right? This is this sacred place. So sacred things should happen in a sacred place. Weddings outside are permitted at times, and they can be very beautiful. They can also be a disaster weather-wise. But, funerals right now are out of context. So people just struggle with a lot of things. And so, sorry for the blather. But no, I would try, if I could personally talk to someone, encourage them not to cremate. Now, or we try to help them out. But anyways.
And then the CDF in the last document they published said that if you happen to cremate and you mention it, you have to make sure that they have a burial. And
You have to have a burial plan. You can't
Yes.
just.
Right.
A lot of people today, what they want to do is the person dies. They want to have a funeral mass. They might not know why they're doing it, but they do it out of honor. But then they're going to cremate, and then they keep the urn.
I've got my brother in Ohio. I've got this problem. His wife passed. He didn't have the money. He had her cremated. I believe he still has the urn. I told him he has to bury the urn or put it in the columbarium or something. Like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm keeping. It's like, John, this is not her. It's the remains of her body. Her soul is gone. Respectfully, you're supposed to do this.
But people really wrestle with it because I think for a lot of people it's an attachment. Like, if I put this person in the ground, or if I put this in a columbarium, I don't have them with me anymore. So because a lot of times since we haven't evangelized or the church has not helped people encounter the Lord, they don't have hope. They have this person they love, the person dies, they want to hold on because that's all they have. If I let go of this person, I don't have anything more. And that's where like the faith is so critical. You say, well, no, this is horrible. Death is not what God wanted. It's an awful thing. It is beyond description in terms of pain and suffering. But we have hope because Jesus rose from the dead, and we get baptized, we get new life. We're going to go beyond this life and live forever. So we honor this person, we lay them to rest. Again, different cultures have dealt with it in different ways, but right. But I think it's because without a supernatural perspective,
No, I think,
what do you do at the end of life?
I think you're right. Ultimately, who was it? I think it was Sartre, the existential philosopher. They said he was terrified of death because he was, I think he was an atheist. You might know Guillermo. That there was a Dominican priest who said he wanted to talk to him on his deathbed. That told him, "Have faith. Something is awaiting you on the other side."
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever came to that at the end of his life.
What's really interesting too, again, God is always working to get our attention. You hear these amazing stories of people work in the healthcare field, who work in hospitals, who work in nursing homes. They see the death all the time, but they see supernatural things all the time too. They see way people prepare for death. They see miraculous things that happen when people sit up in bed or have a vision or something happens. So on one level, even when which I think our culture doesn't right now help people have hope. They don't know the love of God. Many times they live in fear of God in a bad way, and they're terrified of all these things. Maybe they've learned about God or about religion, but it's not very convincing. Mm-hmm. They don't experience His love for them, and then they have to deal with death. So God has to work in all these creative, behind-the-scenes ways to say, hey, have hope, trust me,
And here I think, I totally agree with you, and I think here's where Pope Francis, I think, is trying to bring a little bit of balance, because sometimes it can almost seem as if with the Holy Father that the dogma and the pastoral are opposed, but his approach, I think, is talk about God's love first. Evangelize them, but talk about God's love, then give them the rules and regs.
Right.
Now, as long as you don't forget the rules and regs, which are necessary, but ultimately we say God is love, and that was the 60s thing, but it is true. But God is not like the Beatles, all we need is love. God is...
Well, we do, but they threw the baby out with the bathwater. Like Guillermo, the skinny one, plays soccer. He's a very competitive soccer player. He's really good. He runs around with these kids and families and plays soccer. I would need an oxygen tank and I'd pass out. But,
I've got bum knees.
I
wouldn't even try running.
But if you don't know, if you love soccer, you want to learn how to play it. You want to get better at it. You don't, in the middle of the game, reinvent the rules of soccer and say, this is really hard. I'm going to change the rules of soccer. But that's what we've done with the faith. In the middle of the game, we're like, I don't understand these rules, fine. Or I don't understand how to play well, fine. Or I had a bad experience of soccer, fine. So therefore, maybe I want to leave it behind or not do it. Well, when you love something, you want to learn how it works. What are the rules? How does this game work? When you love the faith, you see the beauty of it. You understand the liturgy and having a moral compass and what it means to share the faith and how to evangelize and how do you deal with persecution. And I think right now some people are suffering because they haven't had a positive experience. And so it's some variant of on the spectrum of like, oh, this isn't helping.
The other thing too, I think we're seeing more and more is these near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of doctors coming out there. A couple of years ago, there was a Harvard doctor. Mm-hmm. There was another doctor recently who had a near-death experience, and his soul left the body. She saw Jesus. All of them, usually they all describe the light of the tunnel. They all either maybe they see a family member alone, their grandparents long gone, but they all have this intense feeling of joy and being
Drawn into it.
and to be loved in a way that they've never felt before.
Right.
It's so powerful, it's almost overwhelming. It reminds me a lot of what John of the Cross would speak about, that, you know, that God's light is so bright, it's almost blinding us.
Yeah.
It's His love.
Let's see here. Let me get this here to work again so we can get these. Got a million comments going on right now. Let's get down here. Yeah, we got a lot to what we've been talking about. Okay. All right. Megan said, thanks for the update about Bishop talking about the situation in Minnesota. Anne Marie says, as masses resume, will virtual masses continue? Is it feasible, realistically, at your parish by bishops, etc., to keep faithful supported? It's been nice to have the option. My parish is a unique struggle. St. Michael's, the pastor is ill, only one of the priests in a grade school, and older population demands on them. I can't speak to each parish, the bishop's encouraging it. We're doing streaming on the weekends. We stream one daily mass. You know, part of it's figuring out what's feasible. If we can program the software so that it would just automatically start at 8:30 in the morning or whatever, I think that would be easier, because right now it involves somebody manually starting the process, and when mass ends, ending the process. I mean, we'll probably move to a point, God willing, you know, our daily homilies can be recorded and then put as like a podcast so you can listen to the homily. And we are streaming the masses on Sundays, because there are a lot of people in our parish, you know, who either are sick or immunocompromised or in an age category where they're like, we can't come in, and we're, you know, for real reasons not going to come in because of the dispensation, but they appreciate having the virtual or the streaming masses, and the bishop has encouraged it. So the blanket policies is encouraging it, and the parishes that are able to do it, I think, are trying, but it's a lot of like manpower and time. Let's see, Kelly was responding to Anthony, yes, check the diocesan website. Bob says, the bishop in Manchester restored the order of the sacraments because too many didn't stay long enough for confirmation. Anyway, I've helped with sacramental prep and saw a doubling of students in the second year. It was challenged to teach those who were the least prepared. Salvation history, in the 2 years prior to confirmation, perhaps very important. I think many of us teach from provided books rather than teaching the diocesan curriculum. I mean, Bob, the challenge you have is the challenge we all have, because the basic problem is many people, like Father always quotes the bishop. He talks about this bishop who was catechized but not evangelized. Before, when the church catechized, she could presume a foundation of faith that was provided by the parents, the family, parish life, Christian culture, the community. That's all gone. So now when the church tries to catechize, she's building a house on sand. Because people don't believe in God, they have huge questions, which are all legitimate, but they're not addressed. So we shove them in a classroom. What you're trying to do, you're trying to catechize, which is sort of force-feeding content of an academic level down a kid's throat, and the kid it's like forcing a kid who wants to play soccer to play baseball. You know, he might know baseball's good for some people, but he doesn't want it, or she doesn't want it. So I want to play soccer. So you get this kid shoved in your 2-year confirmation program, you're trying to convince them all these things. The parents right now don't go to church, their friends don't go to church, they don't pray, they have a million questions, they're not being answered. But then, if you just blow up the current model of religious ed, you got to replace it with something. So, the big challenge right now is we have this process used everywhere of catechizing, but it presumes something that's not there. And it's in a culture which is not neutral, it's completely hostile. So we do need to rethink this. We're constantly having these conversations here at the parish. Tons of people are doing this all over the country, because the question is, yes, good content's essential, truth is absolute, the teachings of the church are absolute, but if somebody doesn't know whether or not they believe in God, and they're like a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grader, and suddenly you shove them in a room at night once a week for an hour and a half, and say, here, let me give you all this content, now regurgitate it to me, write a report, take a test, memorize this, tell me, an atheist can get an A+. It doesn't mean that they believe this. And then if we're saying this is so important, so important, so important, and then they go home to a lived experience which is counter to that, and I'm not attacking the motive of the parents, because a lot of times the parents are in the same boat. They don't know what they believe, and their questions are legitimate, and they're not answered either, and we haven't served them. So, it's a real challenge. What you're doing is excellent and heroic, and we just got to dive in and do our best to catechize and keep working on it, but then ask these questions. I don't know, Father, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's a difficult thing because, there was a time when the culture supported the faith. That has long since eroded. I mean, the way to praise it best is maybe Bishop Sheen said when he started on radio in the 20s, he said in the 1920s we were still pretty much Christian. So he said he could start off a talk and talk about, something about God or the saints or the angel or whatever. But he said by the time the 1950s came around, he said things had already changed. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to start out by talking about science or tell another story and then work up into the faith.
Right.
And that was 70 years ago.
Right.
So,
right.
You're right. It's like building on sand, and it's just, we're all trying to do our best. I don't think we have the answers as to what works best in these scenarios. I think supporting the parents who oftentimes may only have one Catholic in the family or, may not even be fully practicing themselves. So I think, we try to do the best we can, but I think you're right also, it can't just be a regurgitation, a spitting back of facts, because anybody can do that. And I think we really have to try to, again, teach them prayer, I think. I had a woman in a previous assignment. It was fascinating. She was a nun who wound up leaving, but she did something pretty interesting, and I lost her paperwork probably way back when, but she wrote out a retreat for children using the Ignatian exercising and simplifying it a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
And introducing them to prayer at a very simple age.
Yeah, kind of like Montessori, the
Like similar to a Montessori method,
right?
More on a retreat level, and it was effective. So maybe things like that. Again, we need people who are going to be, I think, really orthodox, but also creative.
Yeah.
And bringing together, I think, a lot of different types of skills: educationists, people who have educational backgrounds, psychologists, philosophers, theologians, parents, teachers. We all have to work together. The mystical body has many, many different gifts. We don't, as priests, we have a charism, we have gifts, but we don't have all of them.
We all have gifts, right? We all have something.
We all have gifts,
right.
including the laity by baptism. So I think we need to rely on calling forth the other gifts of the community. I think that can also help to resist. I don't know. Any thoughts, Deacon?
Yeah, I think it's really hard because at the end of the day, you have to help people have a personal encounter with Jesus. And there is no formulas to that. I mean, that's the real problem. If we had the formula and we knew how everybody could have a personal relationship with Jesus, then we will have the solution to the problem. But I think in every case it's different. I mean, I know in my case it was a silent retreat that made me...
And you knew the faith. You'd been catechized.
Yes.
You had all that, but it hadn't sunk in, right? I mean, it was part of your life, I guess, in practice.
But if you ask somebody else, they will probably say that they had a different experience, and that was the way they started having a personal relationship with Jesus. So I think it's a combination between having a personal relationship with Jesus and having a Catholic environment. I mean, when I go to work camp or activities like that, and you see the kids together, living the faith together, you see an environment that really helps the kids or prepares the kids to have a personal relationship with Jesus. So I think it's a combination, and I feel like catechesis is just a little piece of it, but we have to find...
It's a big piece, it's important, but right.
But then you have to find like complements to catechesis.
It goes in a sequence, right, yeah.
So
a couple of years ago, they had talked about this within the context of the Middle East. I don't know if it was Al-Qaeda or one of these more militant, really bad groups. But one of the things that they were actually doing after the Americans, I think, left the Middle East was they were actually going into certain areas and giving people money, supporting them financially, almost like a social welfare type situation. But kids in particular, and adults too to a degree, we all want to fit in. We want friendships. We want to feel accepted. Mm-hmm. What's a big problem today? Bullying, standing out, being different. So I'm.
And with social media, the poor kids, what they have to go through, because it's bad enough you were bullied on the playground, but when you're bullied online,
And so if we can make, I think the deacon is correct that part of it is a catechesis issue. It's part of it. There are other components, making it perhaps attractive in some sense, without watering down the faith, finding new ways to communicate God's love to people through prayer. It's a big, complex picture. Yeah. But I think we've got to, as you said, we've got to dive in and do the best we can.
We're moving around a little bit here. Earlier you were talking about Cardinal Antoine's book. It's called Ida May told us it's The Road to Hope. by Cardinal Antoine. She said it's the book he wrote in prison by writing little sayings on small pieces of paper smuggled to him by children. It has been a great comfort to me during this time. Oh, that's awesome.
Interesting.
I checked that out. All right, I'm going to dive back into all this stuff here. Let's see here. We going into that. Claire says, shutting the doors of the churches tells people quite literally go to hell. Right, and in places where the churches were shut, I mean, the message, you absolutely were saying, like, we're not here for you. You know, it's not, I can imagine, like, let's say, I can see a scenario of it. She said she had to go. She said, I must go now, so I can't listen for all. Thank you, Father. So, I'm thinking, let's say you're a bishop in a diocese that does, for a lot of reasons, doesn't have vocations, or very few, and they're having to close and merge all these parishes. Their presbyter is getting older. They're diabetic. They're over their 60s or 70s. And suddenly the bishop says, if my priests go out and get COVID, they're going to die, and I won't have the few priests I have left. Yeah. So in order to protect the priests and keep them alive, I'm saying, you shut the churches, you don't do anything. Now, what comes across is, we don't want you to pray, we don't love you, you can go to hell, you know, we don't care about you. Meanwhile, they're thinking, I don't want the priests who are older getting sick, who's going to clean the church, how are we going to do this? We don't have staff, we don't have money. So you can see the nightmare scenario, and again, the goal is to divide everybody. So let's see here. Okay, Megan says, Father L, please pray for Angelo's Aunt Arlene. She's expected to pass away over the night. Yes, we will. We'll pray for her. Kelly says, I disagree. God lives in each of us. Our faith resides within. A church building is not required to avoid hell. Well, again, you know, the church isn't just a building, right? Just like, in theory, like a family can be anywhere. A family can stay at a motel. A family can be at the beach. A family can be visiting a fancy hotel. A family can be, but what's a home? You know, on one level you can say, well, a home is just for a few years, people living together in a place. But you make a home, and it kind of becomes sacred, if you will, by the fact that you live there, you fight there, you recover, you have meals, you have celebrations, you have funerals, all those things. Well, the church is God's temple on earth. And yes, we're on the road to heaven, but it's not just a building. It's set apart and dedicated and consecrated. So what's true of us, like what Kelly says is true, right? You're a temple of the Holy Spirit. You're God's temple. But so is the church. The church is just as much a temple, in a sense, as we are. Now, we don't see that supernaturally right now, because a lot of times our churches look like banks or insurance agencies. But, you know, this is a sacred place. The angels are there. The saints are there. The holy sacrifice is happening. So, it's true, right? We can obviously still go to heaven, even if I can't go to a church. But I think she's talking about receiving the Eucharist. When you can't receive the Eucharist, you know, yes, we can make spiritual communions, and we have to surrender to God's providence, and we have to trust Him and grow interiorly. But it's, I mean, I think you see all this disruption in our society. A lot of it's fueled by the fact that people aren't going to church. They're not getting that grace. Any thoughts?
I think I mentioned before the other day, this is in the Diocese of Munich and Freising, so this is over in Germany, so granted Europe, and the deacon, I think, could speak more cogently than we could about Europe, since he's lived there and studied there, or traveled there certainly. The last report recently was that the Diocese of Munich and Freising lost, I think it was over 10,000 people.
Oh yeah, the church in Germany is tanking.
It's imploding. Now, if you renounce your commitment to a church, so they were saying, like, will you lose your ability to be buried in Mass? And it was sort of, okay, that seemed a little strange to me in some ways. But I guess they pay taxes to keep the churches open. But sadly, they feel like the church to them is becoming irrelevant. And there are a lot of social issues there related to, you know, same-sex marriage and other things that they want to see the church change on. The church just can't change on. So I don't want to fault the bishop there for everything. But at the same time, there seems to be at times a lack of a commitment to solid catechetics and solid orthodox preaching, you know, where there perhaps could have been or should have been. I don't know. So, you know, and there are problems here too. I mean, every church has its problems. So, but in a lot of ways, I think this diocese has stood out. Again, have we done everything perfectly during this period? Absolutely not.
No,
but we've
tried very hard.
Tried hard, and I think done more than most.
Yeah.
I don't know. Deacon, any thoughts?
I totally agree. I mean, I feel like our
That's why we love Deacon. I think this. I totally agree. He's so
kind. So kind.
Our churches were open, which is
unfortunately not the case everywhere.
Yeah, which is really, really. I mean, I was really grateful to the bishop. I think I mentioned this already, but I was able to do baptisms during COVID time. That wasn't the case everywhere else. I was actually telling my seminary formators that I was doing baptisms, and they were shocked because, you know, all the other dioceses were not doing that. So I think our diocese has done a great job. Then, with that being said, then I feel like, yes, it's true. I mean, if you go to church and the building is closed, then you feel like the church has
abandoned you, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
like Pope Francis, I always interrupt you.
Yeah.
Pope Francis said early on, I loved his analogy where he said the church is like a field hospital after an extended battle campaign, like a MASH tent. And then Rome closed all the churches because of coronavirus. And then somebody in the papal household or whatever wrote this thing saying, the very thing we're supposed to be, we're not. We are shutting down, we're not being there for the people. And then the Pope, I think, really pressed to reopen the churches, at least for prayer. So they got that going. But anyway, so back to you. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think it's also a good opportunity to reflect. I think the comment about saying, well, it's not only the building, it's true. And we have to find new ways because if you look at places around the world, people have always been really creative in times of crisis. And I don't know, I think I read a story about the Koreans. For years they didn't have priests. They used to get together and read the Bible together without a priest, and the faith was kept alive because of that. So I think, yes, I see the suffering. Yes, I see that that's the message when you go to church and the church is closed. But I think we also have to be creative and find new ways to say, well, yes, the churches are closed, but I have to find ways to keep my faith alive. And be creative, yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, historically, really for the first 3 to 5 centuries, what we would call a church today, we didn't have. We had house churches. Now maybe the bishop had a basilica or a residence, or like St. Augustine had a monastery. But I mean, what we call churches today, really the first centuries did not exist. The house churches were much, much smaller, and you had agape meals, etc. So, yes, buildings are important, but they're not the end, the be-all and end-all. We do want to build beautiful churches, and they, should have a sense of the sacred. Like, think about China today, and we just signed this accord with the government in China, and the persecution of Catholics in China has not only decreased, it's increased, it's gotten much worse. They have bulldozed churches, they've arrested bishops, imprisoned people. So I mean, as the seed of faith, as the seed falls to the ground and dies, it will bear much fruit. So, I mean, you think about Poland, you have Maximilian Kolbe, you have St. Faustina, you have John Paul II. There will be martyrs in China, as there will be martyrs in other places. And church, you can kill a person. You can't kill a movement or an idea.
Absolutely, and I think that the reality is that everything is a mess. I mean, what you're seeing in Germany, what you're seeing in the United States, I think in many ways the whole point of providence, what God is showing us, is that in spite of a lot of really good efforts, there were some really strong parts of the church, the numbers look good, but the real state of health of the church in the West was very precarious. It was a cancer. And then the scandals were revealed, which had devastated the church. Think of all these people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s who were molested by priests, and how this completely destroyed their faith in the church and perhaps in God. And then you have this crisis of modernism. And then you have kind of modern shifting of the family and society. And then you've got immigration happening in different countries and stuff. I mean, all these factors, what we were doing before was objectively excellent and very good, but it wasn't necessarily meeting the current situation on the ground. And now what we just see is this continued collapse of old dry rot. Now there are places, good dioceses, good parishes, good communities, that are exceptional. And I think these are kind of like, if you look at the medieval period, the monasteries were these centers of life and worship and study and community and discipleship. And I think now it's the family or a particular, a good parish, or diocese that overall have good signs of markers of health. And I think that the challenge we're all facing with all this is trying to figure out, because somebody, nothing is done in a vacuum. My experience of the church comes in my context of my life. So if I grew up in this culture and I haven't had the support, I have not had the support I've needed as a person, in a family, in a community. I've suffered persecution, I've been treated terribly. And then I come to Christ and I come to the sacraments in the church. And this is my bulwark, this is what gives me strength. And now the church shuts her doors. What's the lived experience of that person, right? They're like, The church isn't there for me. I am lost. I'm going to go to hell. I have nothing, because for me, the church was that refuge in the crazy culture, and now the crazy culture has forced the church to shut down. So it's this feeling, like these people comment, of totally being abandoned. Now I'll sit there and say, oh my gosh, we're doing streaming, man. From our interior experience here, we're saying we're working our butt off to do this. But for the person out there who's perceiving, I'm abandoned, no one cares for me, no one fights for me, we're allowing the society to dictate what to do. You see where people are just so, but I still think that so many interesting things are coming of this. Interesting sounds so tacky, that I think that, I think where collapse was going on, I think that's accelerating. But where there's life and faith and apostolate and lived experience of hope and encounter with God, I think that's just going to bear more fruit. It's going to draw more people in, So we got to keep going. Lots of questions here. Okay, let's see if we can rush through a lot of stuff. Okay, Naomi says, hi. Suzette says, great discussion, fathers. Wanda says, people donate their organs also. That's true. There's organ donation is a great source of gift in life. We do have to be careful, because sometimes, depending on the standard of death, people may be hurrying to say someone is dead when they're not really dead, in order to get their organs while they're still fresh. So there's something to look at there. Suzette says, if you're going to cremate, don't scatter. Correct. If someone cremates, it has to be then in an urn, and that urn has to be put into like a columbarium or a tomb, where it's going to be there so you can go pray and honor, but it has to wait the resurrection. Suzette says, there's some place in Berryville where the monks have natural burials. It's interesting. It's a monastery in Berryville. Yeah, what's the name of the monk? Holy Cross Abbey?
Holy Cross Abbey, and
yes.
yeah, I think there is a place out there where they permit burials.
Yeah, they do like kind of an organic thing, like where I don't even know if there's a casket. Let's see, Anthony says, is it permitted to separate the ashes amongst family members? No, the remains, this is common, because a lot of times funeral homes, which are not going to necessarily be guided by the Catholic faith, will make the cremated remains available in small urns or in little kind of memorial things. And I look at that, I think it's sort of people treating it a bit like a reliquary, like I have a little bit of my loved one. But no, the person, if they're cremated, their remains have to be put in the urn. Now, sometimes people have made these decisions already and they didn't know. They were not operating with all this information. But no, that's kind of memento, or something of something important of the person who we've lost. There are things we can keep, treasured things, but not their actual remains. The remains are holy. They need to be laid to rest. So we can go visit them, pray for them, go to their grave, or go to their urn. But we don't keep the remains in the house. Here's a common scenario. It's not so unusual, unfortunately. Somebody goes and they're cremated, and there aren't immediate plans or even later definite plans to inter the remains in a columbarium. Then that urn is on the shelf in the home. Things happen. The house gets sold. People move away. Other people die. All of a sudden you're at an estate sale. There's this beautiful vase or vase, and someone buys it and they take it home and they find within it cremated remains. Or people will come and they'll be in a scenario where they weren't sure what to do. They had the loved one cremated. They didn't have a plan yet for burial. Maybe they were young, or the other spouse is still alive, so they say, we're going to get interred together later. And so sometimes you have this scenario where suddenly you have urns or ashes. Again, part of this is just procedural. Because you are important when you die, we want to pray for you. We want to lay you to rest and give you the rights of the church, and then your family can come and pray at your tomb. And so that's why we want to make decisions. Because again, like Father was saying with his in-law, for a lot of understandable reasons, people say, well, someone died and I'm not ready to let go of this, so I'm going to hold on to it for a while. But if you don't eventually have a plan to inter, these scenarios come up more and more often, where suddenly you've got someone's remains and you don't know who they are. And so sharing it is understandable, but what we're to do is to have the cremated remains interred in some kind of final resting place. Okay, let's see here. Kelly says, the scattering part is what makes watching The Way not as enjoyable spiritually as it is otherwise. Right, nothing's perfect. Right, Kelly, I love that movie, but yeah, I don't particularly like that either. Bob says, I love the questions that your parishioners are asking. Yes, we have great parishioners and they ask great questions. Kelly Kinga from John Paul, she says, keep my son Josh and my new daughter-in-law Emma in your prayers. They got married today. That is awesome.
Nice.
Way to go, Josh
Congratulations.
and Emma. Suzette says, there are people who scatter their relatives' ashes at Disney World. Yes, I've heard about that.
Oh,
Please don't
gosh.
do that, right? Martha says, there's a wonderful Trappist community in Iowa who makes coffins which are beautiful and much more affordable. Yes, and also there are Benedictines down in Louisiana who also make simple
I think
like
there's
pine
some,
caskets.
I think there's some Trappists down in Kentucky too.
Yes, yeah.
That make the simple caskets, and I think in general, you know, and you hate to say this, but when our parents, my parents are both gone, your thanks be God, your mom and dad still live, you know, your mother's passed, your parents are still pretty young. I mean, you don't want to be morbid, but, you know, I think as we age, we need to discuss these things with them, you know, a power of attorney, you know, funeral plans, because if these things can be done beforehand, it makes it so much easier for the survivors afterwards, because when you have a loved one that passes quickly and there was no plans and no talk about it, then that burden gets placed on the loved ones who are still alive, and they're trying to grieve. It's so hard for them. So.
And it was interesting because one of the gentleman who works in a local funeral home was telling me, he said, you know, he sees, just broadly speaking, the difference with death between people who have some kind of faith and people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is not to pass judgment on the people who don't. There's just a lot of reasons today why people may not be evangelized or going to a church or a person with a supernatural outlook. So when their loved one dies, two scenarios happen. You've lost someone now. You're a family of faith, you have suffered, you've grieved, you're mourning, you're in shock. However, he said that people with faith tend to have peace. They come to the funeral home grieving, but they believe that their loved one's in a better place, or they've entrusted them to God. They've prayed through this. A person who doesn't come with that framework comes to the funeral home, or the family comes, someone's died, and there's just a lot of pain. There's a lot of tension, disappointment, unresolved issues, which we all have, but without supernatural hope from God and love and mercy, you just left with a bunch of wounds. You just left with the effects of the fall. So they show up at the funeral home, they're upset, all these powerful emotions. Then they, more and more, he said, young people who don't have a faith background, or younger-ish people, someone dies, they just have them cremated, and then they have the remains delivered to their home. So they get the urn or the box or whatever. And many times he says those individuals will show up later, subsequently, at the funeral home to talk to the director they worked with because they need help. There's another one of the amazing benefits of the faith. The process of having a vigil, a wake of some kind, having the funeral mass, having the burial rites, having the reception afterwards, having the celebration of life at that point, telling the stories, you know, eulogizing at the reception or whatever. This gives a way to process our grief.
Yes.
And when someone doesn't have that, it doesn't take away your grief, and it just gets rid of the outlet. So suddenly you've got this person who's died, you get their remains at your house, and psychologically they're overwhelmed. And so they come back to the funeral home because that's their church. They're going to go to the funeral director and say, I need to talk to somebody because I don't know how to deal with all these emotions. And so they will refer them for counseling, because it's, you know, it's the traditional cultures, of course Christian culture has got the fullness of the faith. They had a way of dealing with death, and our culture is in denial and doesn't deal with it.
The other thing too, I think I haven't really seen this, maybe you have, Father Deacon, maybe you have, but it seems like too, if the person who died left any sort of an estate, if there's not a supernatural outlook or the virtue of hope, or, you know, the hope of eternal life, it seems like the loved one then who dies is sort of just cast aside, let me get his or her possessions. And then so you've got people fighting over the will, and
Right.
oh, I want this, or I want that, or I didn't get anything. It's like, you know, can we keep things in perspective here? You lost your parent or a spouse or whoever it was that died. You know, it's like that's what should be the focus, not I'm going to get X amount of money.
Right.
If the parent or whoever passes chooses to leave, that's another issue. But I think sometimes that gets lost, and it brings us back to this sort of, you know, this materialism too, which can be distracting.
Guillermo, on YouTube, we have a special message for you. Do you remember Mauricio Rugamas?
I do, yeah.
He says, we will miss you, Guillermo. Friend, we miss you in Spain. Visit Spain, Barcelona, friend. So we've got somebody from Spain watching you. So I don't know if there's a special message for Mauricio. Let's see here. We got other comments. Suzette's replying to Martha. Berryville's the same way. Chris Shaper says, my takeaway, God is not like the Beatles, from Father Holmes. When you said the thing, you know,
Oh,
how he is, he loves love. Right? So we're going to have like a calendar with quotes from Father Holmes. God is not like the Beatles. Tricia says, thank you so much for your thoughts of cremation. I encourage everyone who's considering to read Scott Hahn's book. It's really eye-opening. Let's see here. Bob says, your comments are exactly right. The best I could do was live in Christ during the class and show that and hope a seed planted to sprout later in life. Bob, totally. My CCD teacher in 5th grade thought I had a vocation. I thought she was nuts, and I fought it for like 20 years. You're going to win. Okay, let's see. All kinds of people joined us. Pat says, sounds like some of what happened in the early stages of Nazi Germany. I guess we're talking about like closing the churches. Martha says, Father, you're so right about the process for dealing with death. The difference between a Catholic funeral and others is so great. I thank God for the rituals of our faith at the time of death. All right, let's see. Any more over here? Tim, who works at Dulles, said, hello from Dulles. Great to see you guys. All your co-workers are still making fun of you for watching the church priest or the church lady on your phone. Jennifer Meneses says, lo amamos, Padre Guillermo. Padre Guillermo, Jesús y nuestra madre guía sus pasos. So we were ready to ordain you on Rectory Channel.
Jumping the gun a little bit.
All right, well, it's almost 10:30. We need to sign out. So it's great having everybody for our late night, Saturday Night Live, Friday Night Live here at Sacred Heart. And we're praying for everybody. Deacon, since this is your last Rectory chat, you want to lead us in a prayer?
Sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. We ask Jesus in this almost vigil of Pentecost to open our hearts and our minds so we can receive the Holy Spirit during this weekend. And we can do it with the help of Our Lady, just like the apostles did. We ask this through the intercession of our Holy Mother. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Father, you want to give a blessing?
And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down in you, strengthen you, keep you, and bless you, and help especially those who have been isolated, hurt, or in pain, now and forever.
Amen.
All right, we'll see you all next Wednesday. And in the meantime, happy Pentecost. And